What's up guys, hope you're all doing well. As always, I would really appreciate if you can take a second to like this video and show your support by subscribing. It really helps the channel out, so thank you. But now let's get straight into this amazing fight that I'm super excited for, because this one is going to be a straight up war with two absolute beasts going after one another. I'm so excited for this fight, and it's just one of those main events that you know is going to live up to the hype, and that's because we've got two stand-up fighters, one being the monster Paulo Costa, whose sole purpose is to hunt you down and destroy you, and the other being the middleweight champion of the world, Israel Adesanya, who has one of the most elegant and exciting fight styles, and both these fighters are always exciting to watch. In this video, I'll be breaking down this fight from my perspective and trying to see who wins this fight and how they get it done, and in the end, I'll be giving my predictions for the fight. So I'll be breaking this fight down in three parts. The first part will cover what I think Paulo Costa can do to win this fight. The second part will be to analyse how Israel can get the job done and still be the middleweight champion of the world. And finally, the third part will cover my predictions of this fight. So let's start with part 1. And to summarise, I believe Costa's recipe for winning this fight will be the pressure and the octagon control that he has, striking, the body shots, the powerful overhands and the leg kicks, and finally his mentality and fight style, which involves turning the fight into a brawl and creating chaos and panic when fighting his opponents. So the pressure and octagon control that Costa demonstrates in all his fights is real and is a really solid skill that he has in his arsenal. The fight against Johnny Hendricks, Uriah Hall, Yoel Romero, all these fights had one theme in common, and that was Costa pressuring his opponents, trapping them at the cage and just unloading a barrage of powerful shots. And there's a couple of things that this does. Firstly, it drains your opponents who have to constantly move back to avoid Costa's powerful shots and his intimidating presence. And what it also does is, in the eyes of the judges, is that it establishes better octagon control, which is one of the factors that get taken into account when judging the fight. So Costa is not only closing the distance to land that bomb on you, he's also securing the round in the eyes of the judges, because he's showing that he is the aggressor in the fight and his opponents don't get much opportunity to go on the offense. However, this does change in a few occasions where Costa actually goes on the defense, and I will discuss this in the second part. The next attribute to Costa's game, which really goes well with his pressure, is of course his striking. Paulo Costa throws each strike with 150% power with the intention of taking your head off. This is what makes him so intimidating, and this is why his opponents are pushed back and why his pressure is so effective, because he truly possesses an insane amount of power, and he doesn't just headhunt, he goes after your body, your legs. He just wants to really hurt you bad in the octagon, and that's what makes him so dangerous. I have never seen Yoel Romero drop before, and I've seen this man take a head kick from Rob Whittaker and eat it as if it was a snack. But Costa was able to drop Romero, also hurt and finish Uriah Hall with some insanely powerful shots, and also demolish Johnny Hendricks. Israel Adesanya will no doubt be wary of this power, because it's not the one punch knockouts that he's going to be concerned about, it's also going to be those heavy body blows that Costa throws, and he needs to throw more of those to get Izzy to drop his hands and create the opportunity to land the finishing blow. The final attribute I wanted to discuss here is the mentality of Costa when he fights. In order to maintain that constant forward pressure to essentially shark your opponents down, you need to have the mentality of really wanting to hurt your opponents, because that's what allows you to push through the pain and any shots your opponents throws at you. And this is where I believe Costa is really dangerous. He will be constantly going after Izzy with the sole intention of hurting him, and that can be distressing, especially if your best shots don't stop your opponent from imposing their will and still keep coming forward. This will not just be a physical battle, but also a mental one to see who breaks their opponents down first. Can Costa break Izzy's confidence and get through to land the final blow, or does Adesanya eventually break Costa's will to push forward by outclassing him? And that's what makes this fight so interesting in my opinion. But moving on to part 2 to discuss Adesanya's approach to winning this fight, I believe this comes down to Adesanya's technical striking ability, his superior gas tank, which is going to be a massive, probably the most important factor in this fight, and finally the experience he brings and his fight IQ. So we all know this about Adesanya, and his technical striking ability is one of the, or if not the best in the UFC. I mean, you're really going to struggle to find someone who surpasses Adesanya's striking ability, and this is going to play a massive role in this fight. Costa's power is scary and dangerous, but only if it can land. Izzy is one of those fighters who can find those blind spots to land shots that you just don't see coming, and that's what makes him such a difficult opponent. His ability to break you down technically in the octagon is exciting to watch, as he demonstrated this against Anderson Silva, Kelvin Gastelum and Rob Whittaker, just completely outclassing them in the stand-up department. Izzy needs to use that superior striking to allow him to evade Costa's power and land significant strikes of his own as counters to eventually break Costa down. Again, very easy for me to say this because dealing with Costa's pressure and power is going to be challenging, but I've no doubt that Izzy's skill set will help him to achieve this. The next thing I wanted to talk about here, which is extremely crucial in this fight, is the gas tank that Izzy has and how this compares with Paulo Costa's. We know for a fact that Adesanya can go 5 rounds and even turn it up in the final rounds. Stamina is not an issue for this man, and he really has a heart of a champion, which he displayed in his fight with Kelvin Gastelum. And this experience of going 5 rounds multiple times is going to play a massive role in this fight against Costa, who has not yet been in a 5-round fight. We have seen that this is one of the areas that Costa seems to fall short in, is his gas tank. Paulo Costa is massive, and carrying that weight and muscle mass around for 25 minutes while keeping up the pressure that he has shown to keep up, while throwing so much power in all his strikes, I don't think that will be sustainable for 5 rounds. In the fight against Romero, we saw Costa slow down at the end of round 2, and this allowed Romero to win round 3 because Costa was just so exhausted, and that was when we saw Costa being pushed back for the first time. There's no question that Izzy has a better gas tank, and if he can survive the initial onslaught from Costa and evade those power shots, keeping his distance, moving around the octagon and taking it into the later rounds, he can exhaust Costa, who may not be able to keep up that relentless pressure and power in the later rounds, and Adesanya can then use that technical striking to do some damage here. And this takes us to the final attribute I wanted to discuss here, which is Adesanya's fight experience and fight IQ. Again, I believe Adesanya is arguably the best striker in the UFC right now, and the fight experience he possesses is insane. This is going to play an important role in allowing Izzy to stay composed in the octagon and evade those shots that Costa throws at him, and not get overwhelmed by his pressure. Adesanya can use his frame and tricky footwork to get out of the way and create openings because he's so good at breaking down his opponents in the octagon and studies them in there to spot opportunities and set traps. With Costa, we know he's going to be coming forward with the heat, and with that knowledge, Izzy can lay traps along the way to catch Costa off guard. As we've seen before, you cannot just charge in recklessly against Adesanya, who will punish you for it. Finally, I wanted to give my predictions for this fight. I'm really interested to see whether Costa applies that pressure right from the start or whether he paces himself, given this is a 5-round fight. If Paulo Costa does what he does right off the bat, I really only see one way he can win, and that is to get a KO within the first 3 rounds, because I don't think, especially given how massive he is, that Costa can sustain that pressure and power for 5 rounds. But in my humble opinion, I see Izzy evading Costa's shots, clinching with him early on to survive that early onslaught, use his footwork to circle around the octagon and not stay still for Costa to unload a barrage of strikes off on him. And I could see him doing this for the first few rounds, utilizing his frame and reach to keep Costa away with his jabs, similar to how Uriah Hall did, who had real success with his jabs against Costa. And then eventually, when Costa slows down in round 3 and onwards, I believe Izzy will turn the tables and apply his own pressure to eventually break Costa and get the TKO win. Pretty bold prediction, but again, that's my opinion. I have nothing but respect for both of these athletes who are putting their lives on the line to entertain us, and that is something I can only respect and thank them for. But if you guys have any other thoughts on or predictions on this fight, please drop them down in the comment section below. And as always, please support by liking and subscribing. And with that out of the way, thank you for listening and see you next time. Peace.